Have you ever wondered why some men seem to just get it? Why their partners are more affectionate, more connected, more passionate, while other guys are doing everything they think is right and still coming up short? I've spent over 20 years working in sexual health and relationship medicine, and I can tell you the difference almost never comes down to size, stamina, or age. It comes down to knowledge. Specifically, understanding one particular position that most men never try in their entire lives, and why it works the way it does, right down to the neuroscience. I'm Dr. Ava Remington, and if you've been following this channel for a while, you know I don't do vague. I don't tease you with secrets and then leave you hanging. So before we go any further, I want to make you a promise. By the time this video is done, you'll know exactly what position I'm talking about, what it looks like, how to do it, and why it works better than anything else I've seen in over 2 decades of clinical practice. No fluff, no runaround, just straight talk. Now, the position I'm describing is a variation of what's commonly called the modified prone rear entry position, sometimes informally called the flat doggy or pillow position. The woman lies face down with a pillow or cushion placed under her hips to tilt her pelvis upward at roughly a 20 to 30 degree angle. The man enters from behind, keeping his weight supported on his forearms or hands rather than resting on her back. That's the basic shape of it, simple. But what happens inside that shape is anything but simple, and that's what the rest of this video is about. Let me start with the foundation, because if you understand why this works, you'll be able to adapt it, adjust it, and use it effectively for years. A lot of men come into my practice with the same frustration. They'll say something like, "Doc, I've been with my wife for 30 years. We love each other, but somewhere along the way the spark just fizzled." Or they'll say, "I can tell she's not really into it anymore, and I don't know what I'm doing wrong." Prayed or I lied. I've heard versions of that conversation hundreds of times, and almost every single time the issue isn't effort, it's anatomy. Here's what most men were never taught. A woman's pleasure isn't a single switch. There isn't one spot you hit and you're done. The female anatomy has multiple distinct zones, each with its own nerve density, its own preferred angle of stimulation, and its own relationship to arousal. You've probably heard of the G-spot. It sits on the anterior wall of the vagina, about 2 inches in, and it responds best to upward pressure. Then there's the A-spot, which sits much deeper, closer to the cervix, and responds to gentle rhythmic pressure along that same anterior wall. And of course, there's the clitoris, which is far larger internally than most people realize. It extends down both sides of the vaginal canal in a wishbone shape. Now here's the critical part. Most conventional positions don't address all 3 zones at the same time. Missionary tends to prioritize depth, but misses the upward angle for the G-spot. Cowgirl gives the woman control, but can be physically demanding for her over time. Standard rear entry often goes too deep too fast without the right angle. But when a woman's pelvis is tilted forward, which is exactly what that pillow under her hips accomplishes, the angle of entry naturally curves toward the anterior wall, which puts both the G-spot and the A-spot in the direct path of stimulation. At the same time, if the man positions himself slightly lower and uses a gentle rolling motion, rather than straight in and out thrusting, the base of his body maintains subtle contact with the clitoral region. You've got all 3 zones engaged simultaneously, which is something that very few positions can actually deliver. There's solid science behind this. MRI studies conducted during sexual activity have confirmed that changing the angle of penetration by even a few degrees can dramatically shift which regions of the brain's pleasure center are activated. The nucleus accumbens, the brain's primary reward hub, shows significantly greater activation when stimulation hits multiple zones rather than just one. What that means practically is that the same amount of physical effort from you produces dramatically more intense sensation for her just by changing the geometry. That's not opinion. That's documented neuroscience. The pelvic floor also plays a huge role here, and it's something most men never think about. The pelvic floor muscles surround and support the vaginal canal. When they're engaged and rhythmically contracting, blood flow to the area increases significantly and sensitivity goes up. This position naturally encourages pelvic floor engagement in women because of the slight forward tilt, her muscles have to gently hold that position, which means they're already primed and active before you've even begun moving. Research has shown that women with stronger pelvic floor muscle engagement reach orgasm faster and rate their sexual satisfaction significantly higher. You're essentially working with her body's natural mechanics instead of against them. Let me be specific about the setup because the details matter. You want a firm pillow, not a fluffy decorative one that'll just compress flat. A folded blanket works well, or one of those bed wedge pillows you can find at any Walmart or Target for about $30. Place it under her hips so that when she lies down, her pelvis tilts up at that 20 to 30 degree angle I mentioned. Her legs can be together or slightly apart. Together actually increases sensation because it tightens the vaginal canal slightly and creates more contact pressure along the walls. She should be comfortable. If there's strain in her lower back or her knees, adjust. This position is supposed to feel relaxed for her. That relaxation is part of the mechanism. For you, you're going to be behind her and slightly above. Support your weight on your forearms, not your hands. Hands put too much weight on her lower back. Keep your hips roughly level with hers, maybe just slightly higher. And here's the thing most guys miss. Start shallow. Seriously. The first 2 to 3 minutes should be more of a gentle rocking motion than full depth thrusting. This does two things. First, it warms up the tissue and encourages natural lubrication. Second, it lets her nervous system settle into the sensation rather than tensing up against it. Think of it like warming up before a workout. You wouldn't go straight to heavy lifting, right? Same principle. Once you feel her body begin to respond, her breathing deepens, her hips may start shifting slightly toward you. That's your cue to gradually increase depth and intensity. But here's where technique really matters. Don't just go deeper in a straight line. Instead, imagine tracing a very slight figure 8 or oval with your hips as you move. This changes the angle of contact on every stroke, which means you're cycling through stimulation of the G spot, the A spot, and the surrounding tissue rather than hitting the same single point over and over. That variation is key. The brain habituates to repetitive stimulation, meaning if you do the exact same motion at the exact same speed for 10 minutes straight, her brain literally stops registering it as intensely as it did at first. Varying your rhythm, depth, and angle keeps her nervous system engaged and prevents that plateau. Speed is another variable most men handle incorrectly. The instinct is to speed up as things get more intense, but that's often counterproductive. A slow, deliberate stroke that maintains consistent pressure along the anterior wall for its full duration is almost always more effective than a fast, shallow one. Think of it like this: slow cooking versus a microwave. The microwave gets the job done, but slow cooking builds something richer. Use slow, full strokes as your baseline. Speed up occasionally. Brief bursts of faster movement create a contrast that spikes arousal, but then come back to slow and deliberate. That unpredictability, that variation in tempo, is one of the most powerful tools you have. Use your hands. Don't let them just sit there. Reach around to rest a warm hand on her lower abdomen, not pushing down, just resting there. That hand placement, right above the pubic bone, can transmit gentle pressure to the clitoris and the front wall of the vaginal canal from the outside, amplifying everything that's happening internally. Your other hand can rest on her hip, her lower back, or move up to her shoulder. The key is warmth and steadiness. Touch that says, "I'm here, I'm paying attention to you," rather than touch that says, "I'm just trying to get somewhere." Women feel that difference acutely. Now I want to talk about something that doesn't get enough airtime in these conversations: the psychological component. And I'm not saying this to be soft or to pad out the video. I'm saying it because after 20 plus years of practice, I can tell you that the psychological environment you create accounts for at least 40% of the outcome, maybe more. Here's the physiology behind that claim. When a woman feels safe, relaxed, and genuinely desired, her parasympathetic nervous system takes over. Blood flow to the pelvic region increases. Natural lubrication increases. Genital sensitivity increases. Conversely, when she's anxious, distracted, or feels like she's performing for you, rather than experiencing something without, her sympathetic nervous system kicks in. The fight or flight response, and all of that reverses. Lubrication decreases. Sensitivity decreases. Muscle tension increases in an uncomfortable way. So the psychological setup matters as much as the physical technique. Before anything physical happens, the tone you set in the hour or two before matters. A text during the day that says something warm, helping clear the kitchen so she's not lying there thinking about dishes, turning the temperature up a couple degrees. Most people are way too cold for optimal arousal. Dimming the lights. These aren't cliches. They're nervous system management. You're creating the conditions where her body is able to respond the way you both want it to. During the act itself, your voice is a powerful tool, not a constant narration. That gets annoying fast, but occasional, low, genuine words. You feel incredible. I love how you respond to me. Is this good? Once, maybe twice, asked in a way that's sincere rather than anxious. What you're communicating is attention. You're saying, I'm here. I see you. I'm not just going through motions. That signal reduces her cortisol levels and increases oxytocin, the bonding hormone, which in turn enhances arousal. This is documented. It's not just nice to do. It physiologically changes what her body is capable of feeling. Eye contact is harder in this particular position since she's face down, which is actually something to work with rather than against. The slight mystery, the anticipation of not being able to read your expression moment to moment. Many women find that highly arousing in itself. But if she turns her head and looks back at you, hold that eye contact. Don't look away. That's a moment of profound connection that can tip the scales significantly. Now let me tell you about a couple of real scenarios from my practice, because I think putting this in human terms makes it more useful than just theory. The first is a man I'll call David. He was in his late 40s when he came to see me. He and his wife Karen had been married for 22 years, raised 3 kids, built a solid life together. But their sex life had dwindled to maybe once a month, and he described it as going through the motions. He was embarrassed to bring it up, and Karen, and according to him, seemed to have just accepted it. He tried this approach one Saturday night, exactly as I described it. He'd set up the room beforehand, spent an extra few minutes with her before moving toward anything physical, used the modified position with the pillow. He told me that within a few minutes, Karen said something she apparently hadn't said in years. Don't stop. That's it. 2 words. But he came back to my office genuinely emotional about it, because it wasn't just physical. It was the feeling that they'd found something again. Their communication improved, their daily affection came back. 6 months later, he told me it was the turning point in their relationship. The second example is a man I'll call Richard, early 50s, with a chronic lower back problem that had made him dread sex because of the pain afterward. He'd basically resigned himself to an increasingly limited intimate life. This position changed that entirely for him because supporting his weight on his forearms rather than his hips took almost all of the spinal loading out of the equation. He told me he was able to stay present and focused on his wife instead of spending the whole time managing discomfort. His wife, by his account, noticed the difference immediately. He was more attentive, more deliberate, and she responded to that. Age and physical limitation don't have to be the end of the story. It's about finding the approach that works with your body, not against it. Let me walk through the specific mistakes you want to avoid, because knowing what not to do is just as important as knowing the technique. The most common one is using too much force too soon. I understand the instinct. It can feel like effort equals results. But female genital tissue is highly sensitive, and excessive pressure or speed before the body is fully aroused can actually cause microtension in the vaginal walls that works against pleasure. Worse, if she experiences even mild discomfort early on, the brain registers a mild threat response that dampens arousal for the rest of the encounter. Even if the discomfort passes, start gentle, build gradually. The second mistake is losing the angle. Once you find the position where her breathing shifts and her hips engage, that's the sweet spot. A lot of men, in their enthusiasm, start changing things up right at that moment. Don't. When you find what's working, maintain it. You can vary speed within that angle. You can vary depth slightly, but don't abandon the geometry. That's like finding the right radio frequency and then immediately scanning to a different station. Third, ignoring her cues. Her body tells you everything you need to know. faster breathing, involuntary hip movement, vocal response. These are your feedback system. If you're not paying attention to them, you're essentially flying blind. And if you're the kind of person who tends to get into your own head during sex, practice bringing your attention back to her. Her breathing, her skin temperature, how her body is moving. That mindfulness isn't just emotionally considerate. It makes you significantly more effective. Fourth, stopping abruptly when she's close. This one is almost criminal in how common it is. If her arousal is clearly building, she's vocal, she's moving, her breathing is fast and shallow, do not change what you're doing. Don't switch positions. Don't suddenly ask a question. Don't decide that's the moment to try something new. Maintain, stay consistent, let it build. The female orgasm requires an uninterrupted accumulation of stimulation, and disrupting it right at the peak resets that accumulation in a way that can be genuinely frustrating. Fifth, and I say this as directly as I can, finish her first, or at minimum, make her pleasure the priority throughout. If you reach your own peak before she does and then disengage, that communicates something, even if you don't mean it to. Make her satisfaction the goal of the encounter, not a bonus feature. The men who truly satisfy their partners have internalized this not as an obligation, but as a source of their own satisfaction. Here's the bigger picture I want you to understand. The physical techniques I've described, the position, the angle, the movement patterns, these work. The science supports them and the clinical results support them. But they work most powerfully as part of something larger, a relationship where both people feel seen, valued, and prioritized. Sexual satisfaction and relationship quality aren't separate tracks. They reinforce each other. Research consistently shows that couples with high sexual satisfaction have more daily positive interactions, express more gratitude toward each other, and report higher overall life satisfaction. That's not coincidence. When someone feels deeply satisfied and cared for in that intimate space, it changes how they show up in every other space too. For those of you in long-term marriages, 20, 30, 40 years in, I want to say this directly. It is never too late. The couples I've worked with who've made the biggest turnarounds weren't newlyweds. They were people who'd been through decades together, raised families, navigated hardship, and somewhere along the way let the physical intimacy slide into habit or absence. What brought it back wasn't magic. It was intention. It was one partner deciding to learn something new and apply it with care. That's it. That's the whole story. So here's your action plan. Get a wedge pillow or fold a firm blanket. Have an honest, low-pressure conversation with your partner about trying something a little different. You don't have to make it a big production, just genuine and warm. Set the room up and then go in with patience, attention, and the understanding that you're not just performing a technique. You're building something. Every time you prioritize her experience, you're investing in the relationship. Every time you pay attention to her responses instead of your own momentum, you're strengthening trust. Every time you stay present instead of checking out mentally, you're deepening connection. That's what the research shows. And it's what I've seen in practice over and over again. Simple knowledge, applied with intention, changes everything. If this kind of content is useful to you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. I put out new videos every week on sexual health, relationship dynamics, and the science of intimacy. All of it geared toward helping you and your partner build a healthier, more satisfying life together. And if you have specific questions or topics you'd like me to cover, drop them in the comments. I read them. See you in the next one.